Hi, I'm Mia Tarducci, and I'm a visual artist working out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. In this series of short tutorials, I'll be showing you some of the techniques I used for my series Inhabit. In this tutorial, we're going to mix paint. We're going to use a more environmentally inspired palette using variations and values of gray, teal, and green. We're only going to use 6 paints to do that, and they happen to be 6 of my favorite Utrecht colors. So the first color that we're going to do, just because I love it, is teal. And we're going to start with the yellow-green. Put that on our palette. I like the disposable palettes myself, but of course you can get any type of palette that you want. And this is a primary blue, which is so beautiful on its own. We're going to make this into a teal by combining the two, and then we're going to add white and black to our mixtures to create different values. Let's put some white on the palette here. I'm going to take a little bit of our creation over there and add you can see that nice teal color starting to emerge. So I'm going to put a little over here, for example, and add a little more green to the mixture and see what happens. So you can see there's a lot of variety that you can create in just using, and that's a little green, that's a little shying away from the teal that I wanted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back, add a little more blue to my palette. And so already we have 2 really neat and beautiful teals, as you can see. And this is a really dark teal, so I'm sure that would be quite beautiful too. Let's see what they would look like then on a canvas. So we're just going to put a little bit of that, a little bit of that. Very nuanced, but definitely different colors. And then, you know, that nice, rich, dark one that we mixed earlier. So those are examples of some of the teals. I'm going to move on now to differences and variations that you can do with gray. So that's some, like, you know, a basic gray right there with your white and your black. And I'm using titanium white and ivory black. Now I'm going to add just a hint of yellow to that and see what happens. This gives it just a little more of a taupey vibe. I really love that. I think that's a beautiful gray right there. That's really nice. Now we're going to make a gray using a little bit of the blue that we have. It's a little too blue. I'm going to go back in, take a little more black in there. See that it's tending towards the gray a little bit more. I'm going to add just a touch more black. And this is a deeper gray with definitely, you can see some of that blue in there. It's tending towards that cool color. See it on the canvas. So those are some examples of less straight up grays. And I'm going to just do one that's just a black and white. And again, we're using the titanium white and the ivory black for this very beautiful basic gray. So you can see how that looks next to those 2 colors. Again, we're going to start with the yellow-green, which is probably one of my favorite Utrecht colors. I have seen a lot of yellow greens, and this is the only one that reads like this, and I just love it. So then we're gonna do a little raw umber in there too. The raw umber is really quite overpowering, so you really just need a little bit of that. A little goes a long way with the raw umber. So we're gonna make a few different versions, deeper and lighter. This is a really beautiful green right here. And definitely something that you would see in the natural world. So I'm gonna put that over here. I'll start with that green. And now I'm going to darken it a bit just by adding a little more of that raw umber. You want to make sure too when you're doing this that you're still maintaining that green in there so it doesn't feel like just a brown. This to me has a nice rich army green feeling. Look at how nice that is. And now I think I'm going to put the rest of my yellow green that was on the palette. I'm going to add a little bit of white. And that's just really a nice color right there. Definitely softer. Put down here. And you can see so many different varieties and richness in these colors. And all we did was use 3 different colors. We used the green and the raw umber and of course white. So for this next tutorial, I'm going to be mixing paint with mediums. Some of you who work with acrylic paint might like the fact that it dries really fast and you can apply and apply all in the same day. Not the case with oil paint. It takes some time. Even with these mediums, it's going to be a process to add paint. But that said, this will expedite the process. So we're going to start with liquid. I really like liquid, especially with my first layers of work. And as you can see, I already have some colors mixed here, so I'm going to go ahead and use those to demonstrate how to use the product. Now, with liquid, you don't want to be too heavy-handed because it does have a yellowing quality about it over time. And also, if you use too much of it, it will crack the paint. So you want to be careful with how much you use. I'm going to go ahead and use this darker army green color. And I'm going to put a little bit of liquid in there. I'm going to put that on. You want it to be more opaque, so I'm going to go in and get a little more paint and add a little more liquid. Now you can see that this will go on smooth. It seems to be glossy, but it will lose that gloss when it dries. Tomorrow, this entire area that I use the liquid in will be dry. So while it's not an instantaneous drying time, it will dry faster than if you were to not use the liquid. Something that does have a shine to it and can be used both for expedited drying, but also as a glaze technique is Galkid. And I love Galkid. I use it for a lot of different things. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. Again, this is something that will not instantaneously dry your paint, but it will be dry in the morning. It seems as though it's the same sheen as the liquid. And certainly going on, it is. But tomorrow, when I come to look at these, this olive color will be far more matte, and this teal that I'm putting on right now will retain its sheen. Another way you can use both liquid and Galkid is as a glaze. And you would do that by adding more part liquid or more part Galkid to your mixture. And make sure you have that transparency that you would want to create a glaze. And you would apply that to paint that's already dry. Another product that I used in this series was turpentine. And I used that to really stretch out the paint and make it work almost as though it were a watercolor. This also expedites the drying time of your paint. What we're going to do is put a little bit of that into this. And really how I use it is with a sprayer. And as you can see, it really breaks that paint up and it becomes almost as if it's a watercolor. So in this next tutorial, we're going to talk about texture. And one of the things I love about being an oil painter is the fact that oils create such beautiful texture and different types. And I just don't feel as though I can get that out of an acrylic. So I'm going to start with just basically showing you how I work with a straight edge, be it a palette knife or I've even used credit cards for this before. So anything that has a nice straight edge to it is what I like to use. So in this case, I'm just going to mix black and white together. And again, I'm going to use a little more white than I do black because otherwise it will be fairly dark and a little heavy-handed with that. So I'm going to go in, pick up some of that, and then hit some of that black a little bit at the edge there so you can see that. I'm just going to drag the paint so you can see how that might look. Now, even though it does take quite some time to dry oil paint, especially when you're not using a medium, when you're working with texture like this, you can kind of play with it a little. You don't have to take too many rests between the layers. Bearing in mind that if there is something that you really like that's happened, you're going to want to walk away and let it dry before you do something different. And let's see what happens when I just add black over that. It's going to pick up some of the white. Another way you can play with texture is to use your different mediums. And I'm going to go ahead into the paint and apply that with a sponge brush to my canvas and see what kind of texture we can create with that. And you can see it's a little bit less ridged, but it still is creating texture. So if you don't have that sponge brush that is for stenciling, you might want to just take basic larger brush and kind of pinch it and go ahead and stipple with that, because it's going to do the same thing. It's going to be less consistent, but that might be an interesting addition. The last way that I like to add at least a sense of texture, whether it's more playing with the visual rather than the buildup, is to use the Turpenoid with my paint and layer. I'm going to spray some of my Turpenoid into this teal. You can see that it's diluting the paint and creating these runs in the paint. And when that dries, which it will do rather quickly, probably in a day, maybe max 2, I can then go over it with more paint, maybe do a similar treatment, and it will create all these various layers of translucency and depth and opaque and transparent, which I think is fairly interesting and a unique way to build up contrast and create that sense of texture. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to use artist tape. It's pretty simple, but it also requires a little patience. It doesn't always work the first time, so you're gonna have to maybe wait between drying times to get that really nice crisp line. So we're going to start with corner here. And in this case, I'm just going to apply a layer of paint using our liquid. And I'm just going to apply a really, really thin layer of paint. Now, all of the things I've shown you are techniques that I use in my own work. But in this, I'm going to just show you a bunch of them combined for your own work. And because I'm sort of the curious type, I want to see how clean that line is right away. Pretty crisp, but not as crisp as I would like it. As you can see, there's some paint that got underneath the paint here. So either it was that I didn't put the tape down really nice and tight, or it just had too much liquid in and seeped in between the tape and the canvas. So I would wait then and redo that line, clean it up, getting the tape as close as I could to that line and going a little bit further over so I can incorporate that. In this corner, I'm going to take a different approach, and I'm going to apply the paint with a thick layer using a palette knife. And then I'm going to go in and just build it up. And this would be if you wanted to create almost like a ridge. In this case, we have a really nice clean ridge, and you can see that it has all that texture buildup, which is quite interesting, and I quite like that a lot. So in this corner, I'm going to try another texture. You do want to be aware of where that line is, even if you can't see it. You don't want there to be a real difference in the consistency of your paint. So what I would be doing in this case is creating this kind of rich corner. Okay, let's see how clean that line is. Again, that had a little seepage underneath the tape, and so I would go ahead and clean that up later after it dries. And since I used liquid in this mixture, it should be dry enough to try and do that tomorrow. Right now what I'm doing is I'm creating that blocking area, which will suggest an environment. What you need to remember when you're doing this is that everything on this side of your tape is what you want to paint, right? So you can't have pieces of tape going into that side. You can have it coming into this side. That's not a big deal. That won't affect anything. So I often just let it sit. The corners can get a little tricky. I want to have a nice strong point there. So that's the way I've decided to block this one out. And I'm just going to go ahead and stipple that in. Now, stippling on its own actually should create some of the texture that I'm talking about, because what it's doing is it's pulling that paint up. And oil paint is thick enough that that will work for that. Once we're done putting that layer on, and you can see too that that's a lot, that's really good coverage. And I used very little of the actual paint. And I want to see how my line did, because I'm going to probably, like I said, 99% of the time you have to do it more than once. So I'm going to probably have to take this again. So I actually really like how that top part came out. I like the color of it, and as it dries, it's going to get more and more matte, and it's going to feel like this leathery, wonderful space. So this is one that I've had sitting for about a week or so drying. You can see that this is a lot darker, and I really don't care for the finish as much. It's not doing quite as well as the last one that I just put down. So I'm gonna redo this line, and we're just gonna go right as close as we can to our original mark. And the reason why we wanna do that is because with the different layers, there are gonna be some buildup differences. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna stipple this again. And I also think I like this color here a little bit more. It's not quite as, it provides a little more contrast to the black. I think I'm just creating like this sense of a waterfall, kind of. And I'm being careful not to be too heavy-handed because I want that nice texture and the different varieties of color that are happening in that bottom layer to keep coming through. So I'm just gonna just add a little bit to that. I think that this color is better in terms of the contrast with the black. I can see that there are a few spots that need to be addressed, and they're going to have to be addressed when the green fully dries, and I can get in there with like a very fine, small brush. Now you can see that there's some issues where the tape came in, and we're gonna smooth some of that out. But what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna wait, and when this dries, I'll retape it, and then I'll come over and I'll do some more work on the middle area. So that will build it up, and it will also create that really, really distinct difference between the two spaces.